Let's bring on Andy McCarthy because I really want to talk to him, and hey, Andy, it's good to see you.
Drew, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm sorry, I only get to see you on Skype now. I only get to see you like I'm interviewing you. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, there should be like a bartender here or something.
don't ask, don't tell. I haven't introduced you yet. Let me just say you're former U.S. Assistant Attorney who led and helped convict the 1995 terrorism case against Sheikh Omar Abdel, the first World Trade Center bomber. You are also, in my opinion, the best writer on the Mueller investigation and all the legal machinations going. Every time there's a new development, I have to wait for you to turn out your copy so I know what the hell is going on. And so this has been, well, it really is. It's really great. It is great material. It's NRO, right? That's where we can find it at National Review Online. So let's go over what's been happening. Let's start with the Flynn plea. I really feel that there are now two media outlets telling us two different stories. Sean Hannity is going on with charts to show how everybody is corrupt and it's all a big conspiracy. And on the other hand, they're basically waiting for the police to perp walk Donald Trump out of the White House. And somewhere, what does the Flynn guilty plea actually mean as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think, Drew, the bottom line is that what we're really in now is a obstruction of justice investigation, and that the collusion angle that was the auspices under which this thing got kicked off in the first place has probably gone by the boards, because we can't look at Flynn in a vacuum. It's the third set of charges that Mueller has brought. And that's why, by the way, your dichotomy of these two different approaches is quite right. And we can tell from this fact, whatever the people on both ends of the spectrum say, Mueller has now issued three sets of charges. None of them have anything to do with Donald Trump. None of them have anything to do with the 2016 election. Now, it's appropriate, I suppose, or it's perfectly reasonable for some people to say that shows that this is a complete waste of time. And they may be vindicated in the end. But it also kind of cuts against the idea that, Mueller is going to do whatever he can do to get Donald Trump, because I think the way these charges have been constructed and the pleas have been constructed, he may be building toward an obstruction case, but he's not doing it the way that you would build a case if you really wanted to get the big fish in the end. So, because if you think about
Well, explain that, because on the left, what they're saying is every time there's one of these deals or charges, they basically say he's building this pyramid case up to the top. That's what, Morning Joe is talking about this all the time.
Well, let me explain why that doesn't make sense,
okay,
which requires talking a little bit about how federal prosecution works with cooperators. So if you're running a big case and you're trying to prove a big scheme, and the big scheme that they had here was this Russian espionage operation against the 2016 election, and you have an accomplice to the scheme, what you would want, your dream as a prosecutor, is to have the accomplice plead guilty to the scheme, because then he comes into open court and he says, this happened, it was real, I'm guilty, I did it, here's what I did, here's what these guys did. And then you've not only crossed a threshold as far as the public is concerned regarding the credibility of your investigation, you've also put enormous pressure on other accomplices to come forward and cooperate. And the way federal law works, what happens is a good prosecutor makes the accomplice plead guilty to the scheme, gets the benefit of that guilty plea that we just talked about, and then you make him earn sentencing leniency. So you don't have to sell the case short at the beginning by giving him a plea to a minor count. You make him eat the big count, and then he's got to tell you everything he knows. He has to cooperate and testify in court if you need him to do that. And then at the end of all that, at the end of the rainbow, if he's done everything that you've asked, if he's given what the sentencing guidelines call substantial assistance to a government investigation, then the prosecutor files a motion under the sentencing guidelines which allows the judge to sentence the guy to as little as 0
Okay.
for time served. So you make him earn the sentencing leniency. You don't give the sentencing leniency at the beginning by short selling the case before he's even done anything for you.
So when you say he's building an obstruction of justice case, against whom?
Well, yeah, I think he's the ultimate thing. If you're a prosecutor, you would never think about indicting the president, because as a practical matter, prosecution is an executive function. The president's the head of the executive branch, and he holds all the, I don't mean to be cute here, but he holds all the trump cards against that.
Yeah.
Because he can pardon everyone, he can fire the prosecutor, he can pull the plug on the investigation. If a president doesn't want to be indicted or doesn't want to allow himself to be indicted, it can't happen. So if you're Mueller, I think if you're thinking about taking action against Trump, the only action that it makes sense to take would be to draft a report of some kind that you dump in Congress's lap for impeachment purposes, because it's not going to ever happen in a judicial court.
Okay.
And there is precedent in the Clinton situation and in the Nixon situation for obstruction of justice or obstruction of governmental procedures being part of the articles of impeachment seeking to remove those presidents. So he would be on firm ground in terms of precedent.
So you think he's setting up an impeachment charge?
Well, I don't know that Mueller wants to impeach Trump because Mueller's a creature of government.
Right.
I mean, he's been in the government for years and years, and when he's been out of the government, he's been out of the government temporarily to get back in the government. Right?
Right.
So he knows how disruptive to the country an impeachment would be, and I think he realizes that you shouldn't do it unless there's a real good reason to do it, not just because of the rupture it is for the country, but also because in the House it only requires a simple majority to file articles of impeachment, but you have to get a supermajority of 2/3 in the Senate to remove the president.
Right.
Which means the reason we haven't had a president impeached in our history is it has to be something that's so egregious that it cuts across ideological and partisan lines, and there's a consensus in the country that the president needs to be removed.
Right.
That happened with Nixon. If he hadn't resigned, he would have been impeached. But that's the only episode that we've had in 200 plus years. So Mueller's got to know that this is very difficult to do, and it won't happen unless there's a real good reason. I don't think he wants to. I doubt he would want to bring an impeachment case just to bring one, to get it torpedoed.
Okay.
In Congress.
So, watching this guy Strzok, who now seems like the Zelig of FBI investigation, he seems to turn up everywhere. And I was watching the FBI director in front of Congress this morning. It just seems impossible not to feel that Hillary Clinton was treated differently than this investigation is treating Trump and his people. Now, you were a federal prosecutor. You know these people. All my experiences with prosecutors have been, I've always found them to be incredibly honest, straightforward people just doing a job. But obviously, you're going to get some bad creatures in there.
You need to get out more.
Right. I was going to say present company accepted, of course. But I mean, I can't help looking at this and thinking that maybe Sean has a point that this is they're playing with loaded dice here. Well,
two things there. Number one, there's no question that Hillary Clinton got the kid gloves treatment, and Mueller is using some scorched earth tactics.
Okay.
The approach to the two different investigations is not the same. That said, I think with Strzok in particular, I want to hold up and wait to see more information. I know he seems like Zelig, but in every big FBI investigation, there's a case agent assigned. So there are agents who do tasks that need to be done in the investigation. And then there's at least one guy who oversees the whole thing.
Okay.
And what invariably happens in every one of these big investigations is the case agent's name is on everything. He's the guy who testifies in the grand jury. His name is on all the reports. He's at all of the interviews. So I don't put too much stock in the fact that with respect to the Hillary investigation, his name is all over the place.
I get it.
Because it should be.
Yeah.
He's the case agent.
Right.
And I think with respect to the Mueller investigation, if you want to paint Strzok, as some have, as a guy who's a pro-Hillary, anti-Trump zealot, here's what doesn't make sense to me. Comey testified when he was still FBI director in March before the House Intelligence Committee. This was reported in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week. He testified that the agents who interviewed General Flynn on January 24th believed he was telling the truth. Strzok is one of those agents. He's the guy who evidently ran the interview.
Right.
So it seems to me that conclusion was that Flynn lied couldn't have been Strzok's, because according to the FBI director, Strzok reported that he thought Flynn had been honest in the interview. There may have been some failures of recollection that were honest, but he thought overall he hadn't lied.
Okay.
And that seems to have been countermanded down the road by Mueller's very aggressive prosecutors.
I got it.
So I'm not sure that we have a completely accurate read on who Strzok is. And I'm willing to believe that he may be a partisan zealot, but other people I talk to tell me he's an exceptional intelligence agent.
Okay.
And that includes people who like General Flynn and President Trump a lot. So I want to wait to see what these texts say, and let's wait to see the rest of the information.
Okay, you wrote a piece, if I recall it correctly, that we're saying that this is no longer a legal investigation. Mueller, it's a political investigation. I think it was Laura Ingraham was on last night saying that Mueller is essentially trying to nullify the election. You go to sleep at night. Do you think this guy, this Mueller, is basically a political agent against Trump? I mean, is that what you're getting out of this, or you're not sure?
Well, I try to separate Mueller, the person, from what this enterprise is about, this investigation, because I think in a lot of ways Mueller is our best hope for the investigation. I think the investigation is a result of the fact that the Democrats wanted to get a prosecutor assigned to this president.
Right.
And the guise that they did it under was this theory that not only had Russia done an espionage operation against the 2016 election, but that Trump or the Trump campaign or Trump associates, it's always loosely stated, somehow colluded with it. And I always thought, Drew, that was a bunch of nonsense, because prosecutors don't care about collusion. You and I are colluding by having this conversation.
Right.
Collusion is just concerted activity. It's not necessarily guilty. What prosecutors care about is conspiracy, which is an agreement to violate a particular law. And you could never nail Democrats down, or anybody else who was making this case, on what exact law it was that they thought that the Trump people had violated or had agreed to violate. And that's why they kept calling it collusion, because they didn't have conspiracy. And then when the Justice Department appointed Mueller, they did it outside the regulations. The Justice Department regulations require you to articulate the criminal offenses that need to be investigated, and that the Justice Department, for some reason or other, is conflicted from carrying out the investigation itself in an ethical manner. So therefore, you have to get a quasi-independent lawyer in to do it. What they did instead, what Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, did was appoint Mueller to conduct a counterintelligence investigation targeting Russia. And the sideline was, and did Trump have anything to do with what Russia did to the 2016 election? And the danger in that is that counterintelligence, unlike criminal investigation, counterintelligence is just an information gathering exercise.
Right, right.
You know, a criminal case has a set transaction. It's got a crime. It's got essential elements that a prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's got like a beginning and an end, and it's finite. There's nothing finite about a counterintelligence investigation, and it's not even lawyer work. In the Justice Department, counterintelligence cases don't get a prosecutor assigned.
Right.
There's nothing about having a law degree that makes you expert in intelligence analysis. So in our government, intelligence analysis is done by, intelligence officers and analysts who are trained in how to do this. And the only time a lawyer gets involved is if they have to go to the FISA court to get a warrant. Otherwise, it's not like a criminal case where the prosecutor really runs the show
Right.
once the FBI has done the investigation and figures out how to present the case. So this is a long-winded way of saying a counterintelligence investigation, by giving that remit to Mueller, what that means is that there's no sensible limitations on what he can look at.
Yes,
which means it's all over the place.
Right.
It's really a fishing expedition.
All right, well, I'm out of time. I have a million more questions to ask. I hope you'll come back and talk again. And I actually hope we'll get to see you in 3 dimensions at some point.
I'd like that too.
Andrew C. McCarthy, thank you very much, Andy. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Drew. Great to talk to you.
Bye. Really interesting, and just he understands the ins and outs of it so much. And if you're not reading his stuff at National Review online, you should be, because this thing where you have one side of the media just literally waiting for Trump to be carried out, in handcuffs, and the other side building these conspiracy charts. What he said about Strzok, I mean, I just haven't heard that anywhere else.